Welcome back to the follow-up video to my interview with Jim and Peter Freeman, the sons of John Freeman and Helen Legge Freeman, the two who bought and saved the local newspaper here on the lakeshore, or the West Island, which eventually became the News and Chronicle. It was for sale in '45 as the Lakeshore Press, and these two, an engaged couple, a newly engaged couple, came to Pointe Claire, bought the newspaper, and the rest is history, so to speak. Now, how did they get the newspaper? This is the preface, okay? This video is mostly about Helen Legge Freeman, and I felt that she deserved her own video. So some of the details that we discussed in the previous interview were sort of left out to put in this, because Helen has a very interesting history. She is the third generation born into the newspaper industry. Her grandfather, who would be my great-great-grandfather if Helen was my grandmother, her grandfather, George Legge, was the first one to work for a newspaper in England, though I can't speak for his father, but work for a newspaper in England and then come over here and then eventually find a newspaper to purchase in Granby. So this is where the story kind of starts. And again, the reason why I'm doing this about Helen specifically, not just because of her background, but because of what she was able to bring to the union of her and John after purchasing the Lakeshore News. She was a huge part in what became the success of the Lakeshore News and the standards that she probably instilled in the company. So this is a follow-up to the first interview with Jim and Peter Freeman, though at the same time, it may also be a part two to a series that I guess I'm starting right now, which is Incredible Women of the Lakeshore. The first one was of Olive Urquhart, the first and only female mayor of Pointe Claire in the 50s. And this one is of Helen Legge, who was a very incredibly successful businesswoman running one of the most successful local newspapers, and a very capable mother raising two sons who they'll describe themselves as being very pleasant when they were young. Here's the follow-up interview with Jim and Peter Freeman, sons of John Freeman and Helen Legge Freeman, the owners of the Lakeshore News, which became the Chronicle. Enjoy.
George, he had come from England, and he had, came to Canada with his wife and started apparently immediately to buy a newspaper. It took him several years, and he ended up moving to Montreal, working in Montreal. I'm not sure what he did there, but in 1900 he took over the running of the Leader Mail. It was called the Granby Leader Mail in those days.
You think that that's what brought him to Granby? Was the business opportunity?
I think so.
I think so.
So
That was for George Legge, my great-grandfather.
George, yeah.
The newspaper seemed to run in the blood because Walter Legge, of course, ran and owned the Leader Mail in Granby, and he actually traveled with Churchill during the war as a war correspondent. And Walter eventually received, and I've seen the letter. It's not in our family; it's in another branch of the family. It was a thank you letter from Churchill after the war, and the envelope is addressed. The only address on the envelope was Walter Legge, Esquire, Sherbrooke, Canada. And it got to him.
And it got to him. Your mother, I guess, being in the business, she ended up working there, right? This is while she was in school, and
Even when she got her BA from Bishop's University, she was third generation newspaper. Had either of us taken over the News and Chronicle, we would have been fourth generation newspaper.
And it wasn't tremendously common for women to become sort of professionals in their own right and have a university degree in the 30s. And so their dream, when they eventually got married in January of, well, the history of how they bought the paper, but the second issue of the Lakeshore News had a picture of their wedding on the front page.
So she had quite a years of experience at the Leader Mail. even when she met your father, right? She had already been there for quite a while, so she was quite versed in that industry,
She was a writer.
as opposed to your father, who may have had more of a technical.
He was more of a printer. Actually, it was a perfect union at that junction in time to actually form a partnership. Well, it was a marriage, of course. We wouldn't be here.
I'm just assuming that she wasn't going to settle to be a stay-at-home mom, or
Not at all.
what was that dynamic like, and the balance of the work between your parents and running the paper?
She was never a stay-at-home mom in that sense. She was always writing. She wrote many documentary type stories or feature articles, or she didn't write social fluff pieces and so on. But she was a good writer, and she was involved in the really, I guess, at the beginning, especially the day-to-day operations in a way.
Very much so. She was an excellent writer. She became an excellent writer. And though Dad was a publisher or editor, she was a managing editor starting off, and she knew how a paper ran. Dad probably learned a bit from her, and I don't mean a small bit either. She had seen how successful the Leader Mail became, the Granby Leader Mail, and it went to full-size paper, and it went to 30 or 40 pages with a price of either 5 or 15 cents at the time, because I have back copies. So she knew what the paper business was about, and had to bring Dad into it. Now, Dad knew the technical side of it, so he was on the other side, as well as trying to build it up, the two of them, with articles, with good writing, good reporting, and good advertising. And they had to go out and find the advertisers. That was before we were born, and it continued on afterwards too, because I was born in 49 and my brother in 51. So those were pure growth years. They didn't take a proper honeymoon until, was it 55, 56, or 60?
What would you say, because, I mean, we're not even into the 50s yet, when mothers were really seen as a stereotypical type of character in the home and taking care of the home. It's the first year of the baby boom, 46. How do you think your mother compared to that stereotype of the mother of that era?
I think she kind of helped break the mold in a very nice, in a very feminine way. And what I mean by that, Mom was always a woman. She was always a woman's woman in a sense. She had always worked. I mean, when she got her BA, and probably even before that, she always knew what a newspaper meant, and how to become an integral part of it in running it. And I think it was a partnership between the two of them. She had lent money to my dad in a formal way, and
but at one point too, she was a very gracious host. She liked entertaining.
Nicely said. She never lost that touch, and it didn't stop her from being a working person. I mean, when we were little, if she had a function to go to and necessary to attend, well, she got a babysitter.
In the very first issue of the Lakeshore News, there was already a section called Women News. Was your mother a progressive?
I would say yes.
I think it was probably considered necessary
Yeah.
in those years to have that type of section.
It was.
I
She
mean,
wasn't pushy about it, but I think
I
she
mean-
recognized the need for it.
it was long past the era. I mean, women having the vote and so on, and she would be very progressive about a lot of things.
It's interesting to right from the get-go. This is not some issues in, or getting to know the community. Again, this is January 46. She couldn't have been in Pointe Claire for more than a month or two, and she already had the foresight to say, we need representation. From the very first issue of the Lakeshore News.
Well, if you
it's pretty remarkable.
It is, and if you do it properly and don't be pushy about it, you'll have a bigger say. You'll have more input from women who count, and the women who count are married to businessmen and the people who run businesses there, and in Montreal, like the heavy hitters or the medium heavy hitters, guess what a woman is going to do? Whisper in the husband's ear, well, wouldn't this be a good idea? Shouldn't we consider that?
Yes, dear.
She was a power behind the throne, but a very soft power. She was very gracious, as my brother said. She was good about it.
Okay, so I want to read something to you now. Mind my reading, it's not the best or quickest, but I do my best. One of the few women in our province who is an editor of a weekly newspaper, Helen Legge of the Lakeshore News, was literally born to printer's ink. Her family has been connected with publishing in the Eastern Townships since the 1890s. 1890s, when her grandfather, the late George Legge, founded the Granby Printing and Publishing Company. Now, I don't think that's entirely true. I think he was the second one in charge there. I think he came in second. Her father, the late Walter R. Legge, succeeded him as president and general manager and became an influence in the life of the townships. Before her marriage to John A. Freeman, Helen Legge was an editor of her father's newspaper. She says, I was literally pushed into newspaper work because when I was at school and college, my father thought I had a flair for writing. She adds, I enjoy editing, but I haven't any ambition to write imaginative short stories or novels. It's like what you were saying about the documentary type of style writing. She didn't want to deal with the frivolous stuff. If I wrote a novel, it would be a typical reporter's novel with actual people and actual events. I enjoy research too, and would like to do critical writing. If I knew more about it. Mr. and Mrs. Freeman bought the what did she say here? Yes. Mr. and Mrs. Freeman bought the Lakeshore News in 1946, which again is pretty remarkable, seeing as the first issue was within the first week of 1946. A husband and wife team. They have developed the newspaper to meet the increasing demands of the Lakeshore community, the Lakeshore's community's growing population. Mr. Freeman is president and manager. The Freemans have two sons, Jimmy, who is almost 5, and Pete, who is 3. I didn't know you.
You never referred to me as Pete. It was Peter, and
They dropped the R.
they called my brother, maybe Jimmy when he was small, but it was either James when they were mad at him. James, you get down here. Or Jim.
If she hadn't been a newspaper editor, Helen Legge would have liked to have been a... What do you think the answer is?
Travel consultant or traveler.
Yeah? What do you say?
Feature writer. No.
A chartered accountant.
What?
Oh my goodness.
That's very interesting to say, because she did all the bookkeeping, and I remember she did all the booking for at least the
paper and the travel service.
And when
both at one time.
When she did the accounting, like it was all done longhand in ledgers that she had, and I have them. If she was 1 cent out, she would go searching for it. I remember her searching for it,
mad.
sometimes hours,
I know.
and she would eventually find that penny. And and it was always somebody else's mistake, so it was never her own addition. But somebody else had made a mistake in a horizontal line or a vertical line, but she wouldn't stop looking until she found it. So that chartered accountant vein definitely runs through her blood. That's for sure.
Quote here: I keep our newspaper's books, and I enjoy every minute of it. That's the quote. She says, born and brought up in the Eastern Townships, she took her BA degree at University of Bishops in Lennoxville. So this is Facts and Fancies from the Montreal Gazette, 1954.
Wow.
This is not the first feature that they did on your mother in the 50s. There's another one as well.
That's amazing.
This is the only one that I brought. But it's the other one I think is even more in detail. But essentially, I think the bottom line theme is how remarkable for a woman to be achieving this much, at that era. That's the big takeaway of it. To do a
Thank
feature.
you for that, because I didn't know about that. I mean, being published.
The paper got big enough, my father hired a full-time editor, and her title became associate editor. And she did a lot of reviews as well of concerts or shows and so on, and she would sometimes, and she would write reviews.
Yeah.
And they were rarely painful. They were
really critical.
They were critical, but in a sort of
more
not
positive
necessarily
way.
constructive, but they were positive in nature.
No, they're
It was
critiques.
never mean-spirited in her reviews,
Yeah.
like some professional reviews in big city newspapers could be. They were never mean-spirited. She tried to give a positive and glowing slant to it as much as she could.
Do either of you have any memories living in the village? Besides the nice lady who you thought was the wife?
My mother telling me not to go close to the water in our backyard, which there's no water there now, and so on.
But most of your childhood was in the Cedar Park area, right?
On Cedar Avenue.
Yeah,
Cedar
from,
Avenue.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
went to Cedar. You went to Cedar Elementary,
And John Rennie.
and then John Rennie. Yeah, because that area was zoned for John Rennie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, one thing I can remember as Mom being a very nurturing, caring mother, she was always thinking of her kids, and she defended her boys right or wrong. We get up to our own fair share of mischief, I can tell you, but
Oh yeah.
but leave it at that.
The kind of playing we did in those years, you were lucky we made it to 10 years old. I mean,